We start with some brand new breaking news out of Fulton County, Georgia, and it is a doozy. The first co-defendant in Donald Trump's election interference case, that RICO case that charged a criminal enterprise, has flipped. Scott Hall is an Atlanta area bail bondsman. Scott Hall is accused of being involved in that plan to steal sensitive election data in Coffee County. He faces 7 charges in the Fulton case. And now, again, we just learned he's taking a plea deal. Let's bring in Greg Bluestein with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and former acting assistant attorney general for national security, Mary McCord. The Reverend Al Sharpton joins our breaking news coverage as well. Greg, I feel like this attempt to steal sensitive election data in Coffee County never garnered the national attention that it deserved, considering how central it was to Trump's plot to overturn his defeat in Georgia. But take us inside, first, the significance of a guilty plea, and second, his role in that criminal enterprise charged by DA Fani Willis.
Well, you're right. Scott Hall was one of the more surprising figures who was even indicted a few weeks ago by Fani Willis, the Fulton County district attorney. And that effort in Coffee County to turn up evidence of election fraud has been sort of a side element of this entire prosecution, right? The call to Brad Raffensperger, the call to Governor Brian Kemp, the call from other Trump officials to subvert the will of Georgia voters has gotten a lot more attention than this effort down in tiny rural Georgia, tiny Coffee County, to find evidence of election fraud and to gain access to sensitive voter data has been a secondary act here, but it is very important. And Scott Hall now becomes the first defendant in the Fulton County election interference trial to take a plea deal with prosecutors.
Right. Let me read from the Washington Post reporting, which did some fantastic reporting on Mr. Hall. The Post reported this. Scott Hall, a bail bondsman from the Augusta area, quote, has been looking into the election on behalf of the president, the Georgia Republican Party chairman told his officials on a November 20th email reviewed by the Washington Post. Hall was doing so, added the state chairman, quote, at the request of David Bossie, the Republican operative, one-time deputy Trump campaign manager, chairman of the conservative activist group Citizens United, and a relative of Hall's. It seems that Hall, while not a household name, does directly tie the Trump campaign and, based on this Post reporting, Donald Trump to the criminal enterprise that's been charged.
Yeah, look, he could help prosecutors with not only the effort to turn up evidence about what happened in Coffee County, but also, prosecutors alleged that he was directly involved in pressuring officials, that he was letting it be known to Republicans here in Georgia that he was an agent of the Trump campaign. So he could also help them turn up evidence over whether or how deeply the plot went to pressure election officials and others in Georgia to subvert the will of voters. So he could help them on dual fronts here.
Mary McCord, I want to bring you in on this. I mean, the other parts of the plot that have been charged involve the more familiar household names, the Sidney Powell, who wanted the president to name her special counsel, that executive order that involved seizing election equipment, seizing voting machines, first by using the Pentagon, a plan too crazy even for Rudy Giuliani. So then they were going to ask the Department of Homeland Security to do it instead. I want to read a little bit more of how Hall fit into the Trump campaign and the White House plot to steal the election from this fantastic piece of reporting that we have in the Washington Post from September of this year. Hall was part of a cadre of Trump loyalists who allegedly descended on Georgia's Coffee County, population 43,000, to gain access to sensitive election data. He later boasted of his efforts, saying, quote, "We scanned every freaking ballot." His alleged actions are detailed in the indictment brought last month by the Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis against Hall, Trump, and 17 other defendants. The indictment portrays the bondsman, who makes his living by posting bail for defendants in exchange for a fee, as more central to Trump's efforts to cling to power than previously known. The Post goes on to write this: Hall, 59, emerges as key not only to the alleged breach of voting equipment in remote Coffee County, a secretive effort to turn up evidence of fraud, but also to the plot that played out in Washington to strong-arm states into disregarding the will of voters and thwarting Biden's win. The effort to manufacture evidence that didn't exist of fraud was something that we know from Cassidy Hutchins' brand new book. We know from Mark Meadows' texts and communications with DOJ officials. We know it was central to everything Trump wanted to do. What is the possible significance of someone like Mr. Hall pleading guilty today?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with really how much he knows, and whether he's going to be, able to provide Fani Willis, assuming that cooperation is part of this. And of course, I haven't seen the plea agreement. This reporting is just broken, and maybe you know the answer to that, but I assume there's some cooperation involved. And if so, how, what all is he able to deliver? As you indicated, he has been sort of, a player in this that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, and, maybe something of, frankly, a grifter, somebody who really wanted to be part of this plot, and so has, found a way to get himself into any bit of it that he could, including the Coffee County attempts. It's unclear to me so far, again, because it is just still breaking, how much he might have that really ties much more closely to the White House. That paragraph you read right earlier on in the top of the hour, certainly there's assertions in the Fulton County indictment about his connections to the campaign, but they're connections, right, that he was self-reporting to others. So I still think it's obviously could be extremely useful, or it could be a little bit more minimally useful, just depending on how much actual direct contact he had with the Trump campaign and the Trump White House.
I'm going to pull the curtain back on our work here. Lisa Rubin is adjusting her audio, but I think she's been able to listen along. You have become our breaking news go-to. As this was breaking, I heard reports that you were racing to the studio.
Stop eating like this.
I'm sorry. I hate to not even give you a minute to make sure you're plugged in. But what can you tell us about this guilty plea?
I think the guilty plea is extraordinarily significant for the October 23rd trial. First and foremost, Scott Hall's charges are completely overlapping, Nicole, with those against Sidney Powell. And given that this October 23rd trial, although the district attorney's office has said they are going to need to prove the entirety of the RICO plot, obviously the particular charges against Ken Chesebro and Sidney Powell will take the starring role here. Scott Hall's charges being completely overlapping with those against Powell puts him in a unique position to be an extraordinarily effective witness against her. Recall also that her lawyers have been saying the evidence against her, that there's a paucity of it in the discovery. And therefore, what he has to say in terms of his firsthand knowledge and his interactions with folks may be more important than any document discovery that they've been handed by the DA or the DA has been able to cultivate during the period of her investigation.
I mean, that he was involved in what is, it's hard to describe any piece of a coup plot as more insidious than the other, but one of the incredibly insidious aspects of it was trying to break into the election equipment in Coffee County. That feels like it could unlock a whole bunch of things for the co-defendants.
It could unlock a bunch of stuff. And Scott Hall, I heard Greg Bluestein say to you that Scott Hall may have some other knowledge as well. In particular, he is not a person I understand to have been a citizen or resident of Coffee County. On the contrary, he flew to Coffee County. And one of the aspects of the indictment that's in front of me, I'm sorry for our viewers that I have this incredibly dog-eared and marked up indictment, but one of the things that they describe is how he flew to DeKalb Peachtree Airport, from DeKalb, I'm sorry, to Douglas Municipal Airport in Coffee County, and that somebody else, Kathy Latham, who's one of the other co-defendants, went to go pick him up. That's an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy, according to this indictment. Scott Hall was brought in from the outside to assist in this breach of the voting equipment data, just as Sidney Powell was, and what he has to say about his interactions with her, their interactions collectively with Sullivan Strickler, which we've seen on the DA's witness list. That's also momentous. I think will be really interesting to see.
I mean, Rev, it always starts with one, right? I mean, when Chris Christie talks about Donald Trump going to bed every single night afraid of the clink of a prison cell door, I always find it somewhat far-fetched that either one, that's true, or two, he's really afraid of it. But this is how it starts.
It always starts with one, and the potential, I think they've laid out what he can be a key witness in. But I think the potential now is that others that were involved in this may begin to have second thoughts. If you engage with Hall, and Hall has now turned and pleaded guilty and is going to testify, you may see somebody First of all, we've seen this week Trump, a judge saying he's guilty of mass fraud. Here we're talking about fraud in terms of an election. Now you have somebody involved that flew in to engage in this behavior. You might start seeing people flip like my grandmother's pancakes down in Alabama.